Good evening, Jacques. It's just you and I for now, and people are going to start tuning in at X, YouTube, and Facebook. It's nice to see you.
It's always a pleasure, David, to see you as well.
So lots going on in the world. The Rough Riders won the Grey Cup yesterday. My whole family is ecstatic about that. The other news from Ontario, I'll get this on screen, but the Ontario Libertarian Party had their conference, like you said, last weekend. Is that
Saturday.
right?
Yeah, this past Saturday, the 15th.
And so let's congratulate Sean Conroy, the party leader for the Ontario Libertarians. Do you know Sean?
Sadly, I don't know him or of him.
So we should have him on maybe a Libertarian Lens episode and have a good chat with him.
That sounds like a great idea, and I love his tie. Libertarian colors.
That's right. So congratulations, Sean. We'll be reaching out.
Yeah.
Other news today, the federal budget. Let's get into it. How would you like? I'm going to get a clip queued up here, but how about you introduce the topic?
Well, we discussed the budget itself last week, at length, really. There's not much to add other than I'm disappointed that the vote didn't take place this afternoon, because we could have spent quite a bit of time, discussing the outcome. As an aside, I mean, it's not terribly relevant to our conversation, but I find it interesting in the media, all the articles and the talk about. I mean, it's almost like they're trying to turn this into a soap opera to draw people in, or to muster excitement. And as much as I would like to be wrong, because I would love the Liberals to lose tonight and go to an election, the thing is, all this speculation and will they or won't they, or it never really happens. I mean, I'm 99.9 sure that somehow a couple of NDPs are not going to show tonight, which is going to be just enough for the Liberals to win or to pass it, right? But I don't know. I find it interesting that it's always the same thing. And of course, the other thing that gets trotted out every single time is that Canadians don't want to go to have another election. And I think that's just, it's nonsense. I mean, I know there's a very large segment of the population that would love to defeat the Liberals, right? So those people certainly want one. Of course, Liberal supporters don't want one because, they want to remain in power. They don't want to risk the chance of being defeated. So maybe they're talking about their own base.
Yeah, Ken, I don't understand your comment here. Jacques, do you know Ken? And can you decipher this comment?
Well, I don't understand what Ken is saying. Ken actually replaced me as the Libertarian candidate in London West. So I have no idea what Ken is talking about.
Okay. Well, Ken, if you want to elaborate on that, that would be helpful. We can comment and get some questions and some dialogue going. But back to the topic of the budget. I have a clip here. Let's listen to a little bit of exchange between Mr. Carney and the leader of the opposition. I think we can hear this. Actually, let me verify that the audio is turned on. Yes, it is. All right, here we go.
Today is a historic day. The leader of the opposition and his colleagues have an opportunity to vote for generational investment to build
the honorable leader of the opposition.
Maybe it's a good day for him and his Brookfield buddies who are dodging their tax bills, but it's a terrible day for the Canadian people stuck paying record-high grocery bills. In fact, the Prime Minister said he'd be judged by prices at the grocery store. Today, Statistics Canada revealed that grocery price inflation is almost double the Bank of Canada's target, rising 40% faster in Canada than in the United States of America. The direct result of the Liberal industrial carbon tax on farmers, the food packaging tax, the fuel standard tax. Prime Minister puts his budget on the national credit card. Does he expect Canadians to pay their groceries the same way?
Today is a historic day.
A little bit of exchange there. Any thoughts?
Well, let me recall when I was a kid in grade school, we had an outing.
Very sorry.
Yeah, no, that's all right. Reminds me that I'm going to mute mine as well. When I was a kid in grade school, we had a day outing to Ottawa because I was in Montreal at the time, so it's a relatively 2-hour drive. And we attended question period. And I still remember our teacher apologizing on behalf of politicians because it's a complete farce, right? There's nothing serious. It's all about posturing and trying to score political points. And that exchange is kind of an example, right? I mean, you got Carney talking about generational investment. It's just a slogan. It's the same old liberal, let's spend beyond our means and try to centrally plan the economy, but slapping lipstick on a pig, really. But yeah, I mean, at least to his credit, he's talking about the day-to-day lives of many Canadians who are having a hard time right now. But it accomplishes nothing. There's nothing. I've never seen a government say, you know what, that question is actually quite good, because if it's a good one that puts the government in bad light, of course it's ignored or it's laughed at, or it turns into ad hominem attacks and what have you. So no, as usual, I'm not impressed at all.
Budget day is always a opportunity for the various parties to posture, as you say, and get the prime minister of the day to commit to like Elizabeth May, for example. She pretended that in order for her to vote in favor of today's budget, that Mark Carney had to commit to the Paris climate targets. I have a clip of that as well. Again, more posturing, this time from the Green Party. Here we go.
Thank you. My question is for the Prime Minister.
Agree that it is a deficiency in the budget that our legally binding Paris commitments are not mentioned. Can he confirm here on the floor of this House that in passing this budget, the government is committed to holding to as far below 2 degrees as possible, to funding climate adaptation, to delivering on the nature strategy, and continuing to engage in meaningful Indigenous reconciliation?
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank the honourable member for advocacy of the Youth Climate Corps, which is in this budget and which this House can vote for. Vote for the future of this country. Mr. Speaker, this budget puts us on the path for real results for climate, for nature, for reconciliation. I can confirm to this House that we will respect our Paris commitments for climate change, and we're determined to achieve them. I can confirm with this House that, consistent with our Kunming Montreal commitments, the nature strategy will be released in the coming weeks. We will build this country strong, sustainable, and pure for future generations.
Well, one thing for sure that's going to happen to future generations is that they're bankrupt, because the debt load is too high. The unfunded liabilities are massive. He's talking nonsense as usual, just a bunch of slogans that amount to nothing. And it's shocking that May has been taken in by these completely vacuous promises. I mean, the Paris Agreement, I mean, that's the one that I think we signed on for the first time. We aren't even close to, and there's no way it's going to happen short of turning us into the Stone Age again. So again, this is, she got placated and she fell for it. It's terrible.
But the Liberal government has just, reconfirmed and well, as you say, placated Elizabeth May, but in doing so, committed the whole country to these targets. Um, I'm not sure how that's going to pan out exactly, but maybe later we'll talk about the 7 new nation building projects, and we'll see how they play into this climate agenda of Mark Carney's. I have another. Well, is there more to say on the budget? We don't know the outcome of the vote yet. Of course, it'll pass, but there's we could pretend that there's drama around that. There really isn't. But is there more to say on the budget?
I would just be repeating myself. I mean, the deficit is terrible. Oh, by the way, I should have mentioned that the interim leader of the PBO, Parliamentary Budget Office, has already come out and spotted trickery again, lies, trickery. I mean, whatever you want to call it, where he pointed out that, as I predicted, operational expenses are being shuffled into the capital one to make things look better. Although, the big picture doesn't change, right? The deficit is still massive, but it's all about to bamboozle. Like, once again, I find it so irritating that they are taking advantage of the fact that people in general are either lacking the knowledge about fiscal matters or they're simply too busy, right? People have got jobs, they got kids. It's and they take advantage of it. It's this terrible state of affair. But anyway, so the point is, not only is the budget bad, but it's even worse, and the PBO is calling out. And I believe that Carney is already making noise about trying to remove this guy.
Yeah, like he's an interim position, and they're hiring someone to replace him. And in the job description, the person that they intend to hire, I forget the exact criteria. This hit the internet a few days ago, and that's how short my memory is. But people were talking about the language of this job description for the parliamentary budget officer that was supposed to be more cautious or something about because Carney was upset, I think, about how this interim budget officer talked about the finances so plainly and with so much candor. He said it's we're off the rails. We're off the rails here, and
well,
so I guess we'll see.
Right? He said it was unsustainable.
Unsustainable.
Yep.
Yeah, and then he clarified that by saying we don't use this word lightly. Like, it's unsustainable.
Yep.
So let's move on to the next topic, which is about these nation building projects. You had some ideas that you wanted to discuss. I'm going to put a map on screen showing which projects are in consideration, and perhaps you can give us some background on this topic. So this is Finance Canada's X account. They say the Major Projects Office will fast track major nation building projects that are in the national interest and will connect our country, attract domestic and global capital, and create high-paying careers.
Okay. So, first of all, who determines whether this is in the benefit of the nation? Again, these are slogans. They're slapped to make them more appealing. Of course, in a free market, it's the market that would decide whether they want these things or not for the government to once again try to centrally plan what is happening. It's madness. People can ignore these labels that they send that they apply to these projects. So that's the first thing. Number two, all but one of these 7 is well on its way already. So the idea that they're fast tracking them is apparently untrue. I mean, there are people much closer to this than I am, but they're saying that environmental assessments have been concluded for 6 of the 7 already. So again, they're making it sound like they're going to accelerate these things. But now let's even take the government's viewpoint on this as being truthful, that they need to be accelerating. I saw someone using the term greasing the process. So once again, we ought to stop and ask ourselves the question, why is it that we have a set of rules and regulations and hurdles, but if the prime minister decides that he likes a particular set of these things, then he can come along and grease the process, which I think in some cases must mean that some of the regulations will not be applied, or at least applied in full. Now, I find this very disturbing. I mean, not that I approve of most of the regulation. I think most of them are totally unnecessary. But when the prime minister gives himself the power to start, ignoring some of them for what he thinks is best, we are now headed into Soviet-style central planning, which for people who are students of history will know that it didn't go well at all, right? So I think this is, again, posturing to try to make it look like it's going to have a major impact. Of course, they're trotting out the same old about high paying, although I noticed that they're changing from jobs to career. People should remember that what we're after is production. It's not for the jobs themselves. Now, the jobs will follow productive activity. But again, when the government starts talking about how high-paying jobs, I'm always very wary, because it comes from a party that certainly believes that if you pay people to dig up holes and pay people to fill them up afterwards and pay them well, that somehow you'd be better off than before, which is clearly nonsense. So it's the same old thing, right? A bunch of slogans. It's central planning. It's going to be in many ways contributing to the massive deficit. It's a prime minister who decides what is worth going for and not. All of this means that it's not going to work. I mean, I can tell you right now, the outcome of this is not going to be anywhere near what he thinks it's going to be.
To me, it's certainly so I was noticing that there's one project in Alberta called the Pathways Plus, and I looked into that a little bit to understand what that's all about. Pathways Alliance is a group of oil sands companies that have come together to lobby, essentially, and to advocate for and to pool their resources around some of the regulatory requirements that they have to fulfill regarding emissions and pollution and so on. Now, Pathways Plus project that Carney has approved is a carbon capture project. So it's not about increasing the production of oil and gas. It's about carbon capture, of course, predictably. What's interesting, though, is that the Pathways Alliance is also affiliated with a group in Calgary called Entropy Incorporated. And guess who one of the biggest investors in Entropy Incorporated is?
Brookfield Asset Management?
Brookfield Asset Management. So Brookfield announced $300 million investment a couple of years ago in Entropy. Entropy creates, some of the technology and machinery for carbon capture. And so Entropy's products are now going to be purchased and used for the Pathways project. And like in every one of these projects, if we were to look at any one of these, the Darlington nuclear project in Bowmanville, guess who is a huge investor in nuclear, small nuclear reactors? Of course, Brookfield. Like the list just goes on. So when a government starts picking and choosing, first of all, they set up this regulatory barrier, and then they start picking and choosing certain companies that are no longer bound to those barriers. Certain companies that can get through the barrier with government approval and fast tracking. It's just ripe for corruption, of course. I wanted to show you the comments from David Knight Legg. I really liked his take on it. So I'm going to put that on screen, everyone, and we can have a look at some of his comments here, because I think his framing of the problem is really interesting. So he says the project announcements are a national embarrassment. He calls it an economic hostage release program. Isn't that interesting? Tells the world just how uninvestable Canada has become under the Liberal Party. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. He says, this same central planning genius just punched a record new $78 billion hole through our public finances because he can't manage basic public service delivery without more crushing debt. The budget is a train wreck, solidifying the final year of a Liberal decade, steeply eroding purchasing power, national wealth, personal security, and living standards in public services. The irony is that this has driven Canada to ever greater 51st state economic dependency. Donald Trump didn't do that. The Liberals did. But he's been a too convenient way to con the elderly with elbows up PR. I'm not sure how much I should read of this, but the point here is that this major project's farce and his inability to kill a dozen economy-killing rules of his own government is showing the work how uninvestable Canada has become, and it's accelerating national economic decline. So the point here, again, he's making is that I just liked that phrase he used, the hostage release program. So he's created a whole bunch of companies that are hostage to these incredible, climate regulations and
Yep.
and so on, all these barriers, and then he selectively releases a few companies from that hostage circumstance, and then these companies get a fast track and a free ride, so to speak, with lots of government backing and investments from Brookfield.
I mean, even the Globe and Mail,
Mm.
described what is going on with this announcement as a patchwork, creating two-tier approval system where only 11 of hundreds of projects get priority, which they say is further eroding investor confidence and contributing to capital outflows and low productivity. Yeah, no kidding. And then the Association of Consulting Engineer Companies warn all projects are major projects, calling for systemic reform over selective favoritism. Well, you can't disagree with that, right? I mean, oh man, the fact that again that they get away with this with so many Canadians is frustrating beyond belief.
It truly is. I wonder that so many Canadians just aren't paying attention to the circumstances, or they're unaware of the facts. So, for example, I follow, and I've mentioned her before, but I follow Andy Lee. So she published this. So Andy Lee uncovered some information, or revealed it. Not that it was covered, but she just brought attention to it. Carney is plugging the Canada Growth Fund. And this, again, is a link between the Brookfield and Entropy, okay, that I mentioned 5 minutes ago. A public fund that financed a Brookfield Entropy collaboration to get them into the carbon credit selling scheme. The Canada Growth Fund is supposed to be a $15 billion independent fund. However, then she goes on to discuss how of the $56 million in expenses for 2024, $43 million went towards compensation. She's talking about how the growth fund is like this entity to get Brookfield executives talking with other corporate executives, and most of the money spent is for consulting fees or salaries. It's a significant grift, is her point. I asked, as I was observing this news here, I asked Grok if fascism is defined as the merger of state and select corporations. And Grok confirmed that, yes, of course, that's exactly what fascism is, as Benito Mussolini defined it. So like, how is Carney getting away with this? Because what I see is it's worse than crony capitalism. Like we have a regulatory environment that, as David Legg spoke of it, keeps most corporations hostage to these crazy restrictions on corporate activity. And then Carney, partners his government with specific corporations. That is the merger of like, at what point do we call it corporatism? And at what point does it become, by definition, fascism? Am I going too far here?
No, I mean, I think Grok's answer is accurate. I mean, we certainly have crony capitalism right now, and I don't think it's unfair to say that you fall into fascism once you go beyond simply being integrated in the corporate world to what's it called, intense nationalism and suppression of opposition. Now, it's interesting that suppression of opposition in a certain form, as we know, is happening in the form of the cancel culture, where there's now a orthodoxy that cannot be deviated from, short of being canceled. We see this on the political scene, where people don't discuss ideas anymore. It's all ad hominem attacks. That if you don't subscribe to certain viewpoints, it's because you are mean and dangerous, and again, the fascist, that type of stuff. So, I mean,
but there's more to it. Like when you speak of a suppression of competition, right? Is that the phrase you used?
Suppression of opposition.
Suppression of opposition. So that's happening with regard to climate regulation as well. Like Carney has created this and Trudeau created a regulatory environment that suppresses the market broadly, and then they open the gates for their crony capitalists. So like, it's the crony capitalism on one hand is just the preferential treatment or the financial backstopping of risk from government to certain corporations. But we have more than that. We also then have a government that's putting barriers in place of all the other competitors in the market. And I think we've reached a new level in our country of the suppression of not just opposition, but the suppression of competition.
Okay, breaking news here. The budget passes with the Green support and 4 abstentions.
And Victor reports there were 2 Conservative MP who did not vote today. What do you make of that? Victor, can you tell us more? What's the gossip about that?
Well, one of them, I think, was on medical leave. So people have to remember, I don't think that you can vote remotely anymore. I think you have to be in the House of Commons, and you have to stand up, and you have to stand up properly. Because I know I was reading recently about someone whose vote, 2 NDP abstention, who did not vote. Did not vote. Like, the question would be, were they in the House? Because I think one of them is sick and could not make it. But and the two conservatives, I would say, somewhat moot because 2 NDP abstention would have done it anyway. Anyway, that's
So here's some news. I'll put it on screen just so we're all looking at the same news here, the same facts. Here's a Grok produced a summary of the budget. So interesting headline: Liberal minority government passes 2025 budget with Green Party support. It was Elizabeth May who was was her vote the deciding factor? No, probably not. I think the NDP were there as well. But Elizabeth May is now claiming that the Greens hold the balance of power. Wow. Gosh.
Can you scroll up again? I had a comment about yeah, like again, probably sounding like a broken record here, but it says including PBO officer Jason Jacques raised concern about fiscal system, et cetera, et cetera. Again, and I've said this 1,000 times, but the reason part of what's going on right now is that there is no skin in the game for elected officials to download to future generations mountains of debt and unfunded liabilities. Zero. You cannot go to jail. You cannot pay a fine. But meanwhile, the only thing that matters is to stay in power. So if staying in power means that you need to pass budgets that for some reason make you popular in the here and now at the expense of future generation, that's what you will do. We have a system that is fundamentally flawed. Until the day that there's real skin in the game for people, excuse the language, shafting future generation, nothing is going to change unless we have a libertarian government.
I think that's why I'm encouraged to find that a lot of younger folks are leaning conservative, at least economically, fiscally, because they see the burden that's before them for the next certain number of generations. They're facing extreme debt, extreme tax, very difficult future.
Yeah, and quite frankly, the lack of empathy on the part of people of my generation towards these younger people is appalling. Right? Boomers have done quite well, thank you very much, for a variety of reasons. And it wasn't not all about, oh, gee whiz, we work so hard. I got kids and they work bloody hard as well. And, like sometimes there's excuse me, demographic elements that come into play. There's, of course, living beyond your means and being able to pass it on to future generation. Yeah, but
there's something to be said about the former generation, the previous generation's ability to save. And, I got into a bit of a discussion with my mother who reminded me that, when she was young, they didn't go out and spend money on Starbucks lattes every day. And, they didn't have to have the nicest and latest tech. So you might say that frugality was more common, but then I'm reminded of how many people spent money every day on cigarettes or a regular intake of beer. And so every generation, it seems to me, has their vices and the ways that they spend money somewhat frivolously. And yet I think there really is a difference between even people in my generation versus my mother's generation. At this age, my mother and father had, a home. They had a summer place. And they had a camper trailer, and they had visited Hawaii a few times, and like that was very normal. And we've talked before, Jacques. I shared with you that story about the family in our neighborhood. One salary. He was a butcher, and the family survived on one salary, and they had 11 children, and they all had vehicles, and they all had bikes, and they all had snowmobiles, and they all had motorcycles, and they all had and they had a summer home, a cottage, and they like on one salary. And of course, that means good fiscal management, but it also means a very different economic environment broadly. So, yeah. Good luck to the younger generations. I wish them well, and I hope that our policies in the country start to turn around in their favor soon.
Well, if it continues, that young people turn their backs on the Liberals, there's attrition taking place, right? There's a lot of people who vote Liberal who every single year are reduced in numbers simply because time takes its toll. Maybe the Liberals' years are numbered now, particularly since there was a couple of comments about recession, and in fact our friend Snarky was talking about the I forget, it was something about GDP, but the sad fact is that GDP per capita has been declining now for 2 years in this country. If we actually use that, which I think is a better measure to determine if we have a recession or not, we'd actually be in one. And I think we are in one, except that it's not, the orthodox way of describing one.
Victor has asked an interesting question. Let me get it on screen here. Should we continue with our current approach, or should we adjust our strategy to better engage the new generation? I think he's referring to the Libertarian Party strategy and approach. Thoughts about that, Jacques?
I will say again, I am willing, because I'm the first to admit that we haven't had the success that I would have hoped to have over the last few years. So I will always look at new ideas. So if Victor has a particular strategy, I pledge to look at it. It doesn't mean, because I've been approached over the years by a number of things, and I always listen, I always study them. But in the end, I don't always agree. So it doesn't mean that we would, but people with good ideas are welcome in the party. And I say this with, I don't want to provide a caveat, right? But when people, for example, say, well, your current message right now is just too different, or it could be perceived as being too extreme. This is where I have a bit of a problem, in the sense that you're either a libertarian or you're not. Although, since I've been often trying to support the minarchist view from a pragmatic point of view, maybe people would accuse me of not being libertarian enough. So I do recognize that there's an element of subjectivity to this, but I'm not really interested in going to be, conservative light or conservative heavy or whatever. I believe in freedom. And so, but again, if someone wants to propose something, I will look at it.
Those were the topics we had for the evening. We've covered the budget. We looked at some of the nation building projects and the connections that those have to Brookfield. We appreciate and congratulations to the Ontario Libertarian Party on electing a new leader, and we'll reach out to him soon and hopefully have a conversation. I have nothing more this evening. Jacques, anything else you'd like to discuss?
No, I think what's worth repeating, though, is what the PBO is saying, right? They are sounding the alarm. They are independent. They are not in the pocket of anyone. It scares me that Carney wants to get rid of him because, I mean, there are these ongoing debates in the U.S. as to whether the Jerome Powell is truly independent and should he be independent and blah blah blah. I think it's absolutely imperative that we have a PBO that is independent, right? That they truly speak what they think is the truth. And when the prime minister starts, saying, well, I don't like this guy, we should remove him, you certainly increase the chances that the next guy is going to not be quite as candid, right? Because he'll probably want to keep his job. So this is something, again, that is terrible optics. But beyond optics, I think is very, very dangerous, and people ought to provide the PBO with as much support as they can.
Yeah, agreed. I think we have a difference in opinion between two economists. So the budget officer is essentially an economist and not of the Keynesian type. And apparently, he's willing to criticize the Carney's approach.
Like, is he an economist or is he more sort of an accountant?
Well, okay, good point. Good point. I'm blending two concepts there. He's the budget officer. So, yeah.
This guy,
but you can't be an accountant of a multi-billion-dollar budget and not have opinions about economy, like economy more broadly. Like he's probably studied economies. He may have an opinion about Keynes versus Adams and so on.
Yeah.
Well, great chat. I appreciate everyone, Victor, Derek, others who chimed in, and thanks for. It'd be great to have some conversation with them as well. Victor is a new volunteer for the party. Derek, of course, is a candidate. But really nice to see you again, Jacques. How about we say good evening?
Yep.
Yeah.
Good night, everyone.
Good night, everyone.